Good morning, all of you. Nutara, it's already 142 participants are there. I think
Yes, ma'am.
we can start, right?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Hearing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall I
Happy.
start? Yeah.
Can we start, ma'am?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Happy morning to all the participants here. Once again, I extend a warm welcome to you all on the second day of this webinar, a short-term course on the art and science of scientific communication is organized by our college, Padma Shri Institute of Management and Sciences, Bengaluru. We all are aware that it is important to effectively communicate our research findings in the form of papers, project proposals, thesis, in order to succeed in our respective fields. And the purpose of this short-term course is to enhance our understanding about research communication. I take this opportunity to introduce the resource person for today's first session, Dr. Crystal Leto. She is a dentist by profession who has MBA in healthcare. Madam is a senior medical writer and experienced in publication writing, reviewing, summarizing, and interpretation of clinical trial data. She's a project manager, medical reviewer, and editor since 2018 in Health Minds Consulting Private Limited. She's a CME team lead, and her responsibilities involve making sure that the medical content that is developed is of industry standards and overlooking content development and design. She's also been a senior medical writer and she has written many literature reviews on oral health, dental public health, dental hygiene, on maternal, neonatal, and child health, etc. Now, I request Dr. Crystal Leto to kindly present her talk on Introduction to Scientific Writing and Communication. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that very sweet introduction. I'll just start my camera. Good morning, everyone. It's very nice to meet you all. You'll have a large number of participants over here, about 182 people. It's very nice to have such a good number quite early in the morning today. Thank you for that introduction. I'm going to start my screen sharing. Please let me know if it's visible, all right?
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to start. Am I audible?
Ma'am,
Yes,
can you make it full screen slideshow?
Yeah, 1 second. Oh, no, sorry. All right.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to talk about scientific writing, the basics. We're going to tell in a little about each type of scientific writing, and the main one that's really important to you all, that would be your publication writing. We will dwell a little bit on each topic. I'd like to also ask you all to have small interaction with everyone present over here today. What do you think is really the importance of scientific writing? If there's anyone that would actually want to interact. Is there anyone?
You can type it, your answers in the chat box.
Okay, I think I'm stressing everybody out. That's okay, no worries. We'll start with the basics of scientific writing, all right? In science, the credit goes to the man who convinces the world, not to the man to whom the idea occurs first. This is the basics of it. You can come up with thousands of ideas, but till and until you convince the world that this is what it is, you are not going to get credit for it. So this is what is really important, and this is where scientific writing comes into play. This was a very important saying by Sir Francis Darwin. Now, why scientific writing? You have three major indications. One is to disseminate your research findings, publication as a requirement, maybe as a career. Now, when I say to disseminate your research findings, I mean to show your data. When I say publication as a requirement, I mean maybe you are currently in a position where you require publication. Probably you are teaching at a particular institute where it may be a requirement. It might be a requirement for your college purpose if you are a student, or scientific writing as a career, which actually is a very lucrative and very interesting career if that was something that you would be interested in. Now, the objectives of scientific writing are very, very simple. There has to be documented proof of your research and your findings. If there is no documented proof, there is no proof of what you've done. This writing your research enables no loss of data. It is saved. There is proof of it. It's a form of communication to all in the field. That's how you tell your peers that this is what you've done, this is what you've achieved, and other people will become aware about it. Now, if you've done a particular research and if you've published it, the chances of people doing the same research again is limited, hence limiting repetition. So what happens is that people can go ahead and do different research. It imparts knowledge. It gives people the idea, okay, that this can be done. These are your findings. And it helps further development of science. If you consider doing any of your research activities for your MSc students, you will probably have a thesis publication. Now, what happens in that is that you will cite literature from other authors. So that is what you're using. That is published data. That is the importance of publication. If you do not have that data, you have nothing to write. You have nothing to show. Everything that you have learned up till today is because it is published somewhere. Someone has done the research. It has been reviewed by people. It has been accepted by people, and it is published somewhere. So every basic thing that you have learned up till today and you will continue to learn is because literature is published, research is published. This is the importance of scientific writing. Now, if we go on to the types of scientific writing, if I'm going a little fast anywhere at any point, please do let me know. If you'll have any doubts, we will deal with them at the end of the presentation, all right? The types of scientific writing include original research, review articles, editorials, book reviews, letters to the editor, and book chapters. Now, the main important things for you all will be the original research. This includes protocol writing, thesis writing, and manuscript writing. Going to a brief overview, the task of writing a research paper can be a bit daunting. Now, unless your paper is correctly written, at best your publication will be delayed. At worst, it will never be published. This presentation will give you an overview of how to write a well-structured research paper for the purpose of publication. Now, author versus reader behavior. Now, you have, as you all will be the ones that are writing the articles, you all will be the authors. The ones that will read your articles will be your readers. As authors, you always want to publish more. You want to have several publications to your name, as this is always beneficial. As readers, we always want to read very little. So this is a balance that has to be maintained. There's always a clash in these two things. So the one thing that to keep in mind for the author is to always keep the reader interested in what you're writing. It is not only important to write your research, it is also important to write your research in a very interesting way. Okay. Authors are generally journal focused. You will want your article to be published in a particular journal. Readers do not worry about what journal the article is published in most of the times. They are very article focused. If the article interests them, if it is of a topic of interest, and if it is written well, they will continue to read it. Now, your writing stages are four stages mainly. It's getting into the mood of writing, which is the most difficult because we tend to procrastinate a lot for everything. So you have to get yourself moving, you have to pick yourself up and get yourself in that right frame of mind to write. Now, your first draft can be really, really, really slow. That's all right. Put your best into it, do your research, then you keep revising, keep revising, keep revising, and you finally reach the finish line. Now, key elements of publishing are the few things that you have to keep in mind are your ethical issues, your style and language, your structure of your paper, your components of your paper, article submission and journal selection, publisher's process, and peer review. Now, we're going to dwell with each of these one step at a time. We'll start first with ethical issues. You have your disclosure of conflict of interest. If there is any, it always has to be mentioned at the bottom of your article. Acknowledgement of funding sources. Suppose your research is based on receiving some funding, some grant from a particular institute or anything. This always has to be mentioned. This is by ethics. This has to be done. You have image manipulation guidelines, and for online submissions, you have supplemental information like data sets and videos that have to be given. For health sciences, this is for you all very important. If it is a trial submission to your CTRI, your clinical trials registry, and you have to get a CTRI number because at the time of journal submission, if it is a clinical trial, you will be requested to provide this number. If not, you cannot go ahead and submit your article to the journal. The most important thing is that if your article is not a clinical trial, you will have to have an institutional review board approval. Your institutional ethics committee will provide you an ethics certificate, an approval certificate. This is very, very important. Please do not think that you can bypass this step and go ahead and develop your manuscript. Ethics certificate is always important. It is something that is requested by the journal, without which you cannot go ahead into publication. Going ahead now, for style and language, this refers to the journal's requirement. You can write two ways. One thing is keeping a specific journal in mind. You probably have a journal that you want to submit in, write for, or the other way would to write and then to fit into the journal style. If you have a particular journal in mind, which will make things a lot easier, what you would do is that you would write, you would go through their author instructions first and write your article based on their requirements. The other one is that you would finally format your final article to the requirements of the journal. Your objectives and your conclusions should be as clear and as concise as possible so that everyone is able to understand what exactly you are trying to prove. This is the difference in style. It's the same person. One is a completely Indianized version, the other is a completely Westernized person. This is the difference in your article. It's going to be the same article. It's just that based on the requirement is how you are going to present it. It makes a world of a difference for the journal for accepting it. If you follow their style and their requirements, it is easier to get acceptance into these journals. Now, when we come to language, language is very important for clarity, for making your point precise, for getting your point across to everyone that is going to read your article. For example, a very simple comment over here on screen is "Let's eat, Grandpa," and the other one is "Let's eat, Grandpa." One has a comma after eat and one does not. The stark difference between the two is that the first one will scare the hell out of Grandpa because he's going to think that you want to eat him. The second one, the comma indicates that you are calling him to eat with you. So language is very important. A simple comma can make a lot of difference in everything that you are saying. Punctuation is very important. Spellings, the flow of language, a step-by-step explanation of everything. Structure of a paper. Now, you have to keep in mind that to you, your paper is everything as the author because you have worked really hard for it. It is your research. It's as good as your baby. For someone that's reading your article, they can read it at different levels. They can pick at the title. They can want to just read the abstract. They can want to read the entire paper. They don't have to read the entire thing, but they can select to read at different levels. So keeping that in mind, you have to understand that at all level, at each and every level, at all these three levels, your article has to be able to grasp the curiosity of the reader. You have to be able to get their attention. Your title, your abstract, your article itself, at each level, it should be able to sustain itself and it should be able to explain itself. The components of a paper are we'll go stepwise of what a manuscript would actually look like. You start with your title, then you have the authors, then the abstract, keywords, an introduction, a methodology or method section, a results section, a discussion, an acknowledgement, references, and appendices in some journals. What a title is that a title clearly describes the content. Your title has to be very catchy. Your authors ensures recognition for the writers. Please remember the authors have to be given in order. Your abstract describes what was done. It's usually a gist of your article. Your keywords ensures that the article is identified in abstracting and indexing. Introduction explains the problem. Methodology explains how the data was collected. Discussion.
Miss Crystal, I'm sorry to interfere in between. I'm Dr. Anuradha.
Sure.
Please make that disable the annotation. Go to the top and disable the annotation to the speakers, to the other part.
Where do I do that?
You have three dots. If you go to the toolbar, top toolbar, there you have three dots. There you have annotation. If you click on that, you can disable the annotation.
One second, I need to exit the full screen for that first, right?
Not required. If you move your cursor to the top of the screen, you get one toolbar. Near the share screen option and other, you get a toolbar. You are not getting it?
Yeah, three dots.
There you disable annotations.
1 second.
For the participants. Three dots will come there, you click it.
Disable annotation for others. Yes. Is that fine?
Yeah. So that we will on the thing. Carry on. Sorry to disturb you. Please carry on.
No worries. That's all right. Okay. Please excuse the scribbling that has come ahead. That's all right. No worries. If you'll have any doubts, please ask me at the end. So
raise your hand or type in the chat box and time will be given for discussion. Please, participants, do maintain the etiquette and don't scribble on the screen.
All right. So going ahead, these are the basic sections of a paper, of a manuscript. Now your manuscript, you have to make sure that it has each and every section. We're going to deal with each section one by one. Okay. So your author's listing has to include those who have made an intellectual contribution to the research or those who will publicly defend the data. It is very important that the author's listing includes those who have helped with the research. It is not correct or ethically appropriate to add people that have not. Okay. There will be a particular order for from discipline to discipline. As mentioned over there, in some places the corresponding author's name appears first. This will be mentioned by your particular journal. Now, your title describes the paper's content clearly and precisely, including your keywords. It is the advertisement of your article, so do not use abbreviations. Be very specific in what your title says. Try to make it catchy, as well as your keywords should always be mesh terms. And they are meant for indexing in databases and ease of finding your articles in search engines. Now, considering titles for you, all you Potterheads over there, Dumbledore's Dark Secrets Revealed. This title is catchy for someone who's interested in Harry Potter. If you go ahead, there's another one over here. The eagle has landed. Two men walk on the moon. If you see the small title over there, one small step for man, giant leap for mankind. Now, that is one title that sticks on even till today, even though this was so many years ago. So that is the importance of your title. It gives you an idea of exactly what has happened. It stays in your mind even today. It's very catchy. And we remember the incident. That is what your title has to do. It has to be catchy. It has to stay in people's mind. It has to, in those few words, indicate what is done or what the rest of your article is about. Your abstract has to briefly summarize your entire research. Most often than not, it has to be around 250 words. Now, 250 words is the requirement of most journals. This is something that you have to keep in mind when you're developing the abstract. Most commonly, your abstract is something that you develop after you develop the entire research, the entire research literature, after you've written the entire article. Keep it to 250 words because what will happen is that when you go to submit to a journal, they require a maximum of 250 words. If not, your article gets sent back to you and then you have to edit it. So keep this in mind. Your abstract should be 250 words, preferably a structured one with the problem, the method, the results, and the conclusion included in it. All right. Going to the next thing. Now, considering your abstract is a 2 minutes trailer. It is, like I said, each and everything has to stand on its own. It has to be very interesting. It has to be compact. It has to give you a gist of what was done and an idea of what to expect in a way, in those maximum 250 words. Going ahead, after your abstract comes the introduction. All right. Now, your introduction is key for someone who is going to read your entire article. Your introduction is key. So you have to clearly state the problem being investigated, the background that explains the problem and reasons for conducting the research. In an introduction, when someone reads your introduction, the basic need for the study has to be felt. Why are you doing this research? Why have you wasted so much time? Why have you spent that time of yours, that valuable time doing this research, getting these findings? What value are you adding? This is what the person that's reading wants to know. What is the value in the end? What is the value of them reading the rest of your article? So the need for the study needs to be explained. Summarize it with relevant research to provide context. State how your work differs from published work. What are the differences in what you are doing? You can identify questions, research questions, and you can answer them, giving them a step-by-step way to get into why your research was done. Explain any other findings that are challenging or similar to something that you have done. Briefly describe what your experiment is, your hypothesis, your research question, and your basic design and methodology. Your introduction is like this. It's a very simple hello, but it has to intrigue the list of people that your readers. It has to intrigue them. They have. Okay, there is a little bit of noise. Can you please mute your speakers? Thank you. All right, going ahead. After the introduction, we have the methodology section. Okay, your methodology section is going to explain Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, all right, thank
Yeah.
you. Going to the methodology section, we're going to, your methodology section is going to explain to your readers what exactly you have done. Your methodology has to be crisp, it has to be exact, and it has to be able to explain to them what you've done, so that in future, suppose somebody wants to go ahead and do the same thing, they're able to follow your same steps. Replication is important. Your methodology will also partially be replicated from somewhere else. So hence you understand the importance of clarity of what you have done, the clarity of writing what exactly you have done. This also helps other readers review and approve what you've done by understanding it step by step. Now, it has to provide your reader with enough details. It has to explain how you studied the problem, identify the procedures you followed, and these have to be in a chronological order where possible. Explain your methodology in detail. Otherwise, name the method and cite previously published work. This can also be done. Include the frequency of observations, what type of data were recorded. Be precise in describing measurements and include errors of measurements or research design limits. Now, the purpose of your methodology is to allow for authentication and replication, like I mentioned below. Your methodology is as good as a recipe. Uh, your recipe should be able, someone else taking up your recipe should be able to replicate it and get almost the similar thing, if not exactly the same. That's how good your methodology has to be, a step-by-step explanation of everything. It also, like I said, allows for authentication. People from the same field are able to authenticate the work you have done. Hence, they are able to authenticate and validate the results that you have also achieved. Methodology should be very clear. The person reading it should not be confused. They should be able to replicate everything that you've done. Now, it's the same as taking a recipe from someone and going ahead and doing it. They should be able to do something similar, if not exactly the same. It's like your online purchase or like the previous slide, baking the cake. Your expectation is something, the reality is something else. Your methodology should provide the expectation and the reality to be almost similar. It cannot be starkly different. Now, your results section is a very important section as well. Please do keep in mind that each section of your manuscript is very, very important, and each section has its own weightage. Uh, but your results section is what are the exact findings of your study. So you should present it well. You should be objective while presenting it and explain what you found. So you have to show your results in a very chronological order. Figures should have a brief description so that the reader is able to understand what information is given in the figure as well as the table. Also, one thing to keep in mind is that tables and figures should be given when necessary to help a reader understand. Do not keep writing pages and pages, especially when it comes to manuscripts. Tables and figures are very self-descriptive. A small explanation below would suffice, all right? And make sure that there is no repetition. Do not write 2 paragraphs and then add a table on the same thing. This will be a duplication of data, and this is not very interesting to read. And this is generally pointed out by journals. So do not duplicate data, do not duplicate material in your own article. Keep it crisp, keep it simple, keep it precise, with considering that your data has to be easily understood and not repetitive. So you keep your reader engrossed as well. Now, the last is your discussion and your conclusion. Now, your discussion is very important. It is what also will make or break your paper. Results are your findings. You can have positive findings, you can have negative findings. I have seen many authors struggle because their findings would be negative, and then they are at a loss because they don't know whether to publish. Please do keep in mind that a negative finding is also a finding. It doesn't mean that you've done something wrong or you cannot publish that data. A negative finding is also a finding. It is the way you write your discussion that will give that weightage, it will give value to your paper. Now, considering your discussion, your results have to be discussed step by step. You have to go in a step by step manner. Each result has to be discussed. What would be preferable you do is that if you are writing it on Word, is that you use a split screen so that you keep your result on top and you keep your discussion below so that you know you're going step by step, because generally while a review is done, this is how it is reviewed to make sure that everything is followed. Now, uh, there are a few ways that you can describe your discussion. One is with the findings, what you have found. The other is comparing to similar studies what they have found. Maybe you will find studies with similar findings. You will find studies with findings that are quite contrary to what you have found. That is also okay. Please do include that as well. And the fourth thing, which is the most important thing, is you have to provide an explanation to your findings. This adds value to your discussion. What is the reason of your finding? If you can explain that, that adds a lot of value to the paper. Uh, and lastly is your conclusion. Your conclusion should directly support your results. You can always hypothesize as well, but please do keep in mind that everything has to be in line. Your conclusion has to go along with the aim of the study, along with your discussion, along with your results. It cannot be a stark opposite. Everything goes one by one by one. It has to be in order. Please feel free to hypothesize as well. Suggestions can be given for future studies as well. These are things to keep in mind while developing your manuscript. Referencing. Now, after your entire body of your article is done, referencing is something that you have to do. It is something that you will do in the process of writing, but actually formatting your references will be done in the end. Uh, Please do keep in mind that when you take literature from somewhere else, one, it has to be cited. You have to be giving credit to whoever's work you are taking. You have to acknowledge the source. Secondly, it is important not to plagiarize as well. So do not copy paste content into your article. Rephrase it appropriately and give them acknowledgement for their findings. So, as mentioned here, any information not from your experiment and not common knowledge should be recognized by a citation. How references are presented varies considerably. Now, journals have different referencing formats. It is preferable at before submission, you check what are the author instructions and format your references accordingly. Avoid references that are difficult to find. Avoid listing references that were not important to the study just to build up your references. Now, generally, I have seen in thesis that you will have quite a few references, around 50 to 60 that are old. That's all right. But when you go into manuscript writing, when you want to go to convert your thesis to a manuscript that you want to push in for publication, always keep in mind that it is preferable to use references within the last 5 years as far as possible, maximum the last 8 years, and maybe you can have one or two, maximum three papers that are very old. They would probably be very important papers for very important baseline findings. So these can be added. This requirement is very important because many times when you go to submit to a journal, they require references from recent articles. They do not want references from older articles. So what happens is that at this point of time, once you have already written your article and you are going to submit to a particular journal. To change references to the last 5 years becomes a very difficult task. So it is always preferable that while you're writing, use recent literature to cite your comments, to cite your data, to provide a backing for your paper as far as possible. Now, basic take-home message from this very short presentation of mine is that your abstract should be clear, concise, and precise. Introduction should establish the idea of the topic and explain the need for the study. The need for the study is very important. If by the end of your introduction, the reader does not get the importance of the need for your study, they will not progress to read beyond. A methodology should enable replication. This is very important. This is important for validation verification as well as for replication. Your results should be appropriately presented and supported statistically. A statistical analysis has to be done for your results. This gives your results weightage. A discussion is for creativity. Always feel free to express yourself in your discussion. Give weightage to your findings. If you found something that is different, it does not have to be wrong. If you found something that is negative, it does not have to be wrong. A negative finding is also a finding. It is how you present it. So explain your findings, provide an inference, and compare with previous studies. These are the things to always keep in mind about a discussion. A discussion is not just a verbatim replication of what your results are. You cannot just go on saying, these are my findings. I found this. Your discussion has no value. Your discussion is supposed to be creatively written. Explain what you found. Support it with other findings from previous literature. If maybe other findings do not agree what you found, please do mention that as well. That's okay. But you need to give an explanation as to the possibility of why your finding is like that. And there will always be a finding. Maybe there will always be an explanation for that. Probably of maybe the sample you've used, maybe the environment, maybe some other shortcomings. There's always an explanation. And lastly, most importantly, plagiarism should be avoided. You have to paraphrase smartly, because you cannot plagiarize data. All right. And so that's about it. Thank you so much for your time and making the effort to wake up early in the morning and listen to me. If we have any questions, you can please ask. I would really love to help you out with that.
It's open for questionnaire. Students can unmute yourself or post your questions in the chat box. Make it very interactive.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ma'am, I would like to ask a little about journals. Like, how do we decide about the journal we should be looking forward to?
All right. So journal selection is a topic on its own. Few things that you have to keep in mind. Now you have varieties of journals. Now your journals come under certain indexing bodies. You have PubMed indexing, you have Scopus indexing, as well as you have Index Copernicus indexing. Now your most valuable publications come in your Scopus or your PubMed journals. These add a lot of value. Index Copernicus is not always acceptable everywhere. Mostly in institutes and all, what they prefer is Scopus and PubMed publication. I'm not sure what your college is okay with. If Dr. Indu, ma'am, if you could tell me that, please. Any which ways, considering that, one is to look at the indexing. Two is For looking at the indexing, make sure you go to the appropriate sites and look for what indexing is. Suppose you want a Scopus or a PubMed journal, make sure that your journal is on the Scopus list, or for PubMed, it should be on the NLM catalog list. Do not only check the journal site. Now, what happens is that many journals will say that they are Scopus or PubMed indexed when they are not. And sometimes they would also be on the Beale's list. This is a list of predatory journals where I would suggest you would not put in your publications. Make sure your journals are not there on that list as well. So you would select your journal by looking at the scope of the journal. Make sure that your research is in line of the scope of the journal. Once you go to the journal homepage, there will be about the journal or scope of the journal mentioned, where they will clearly explain what kind of articles they would be interested in. Please make sure that you read the scope and your articles fall in line with the scope. Another thing that you could consider is that when you're going through the journals, go through the last maybe 1 or 2 issues and see what articles they have published. If they are somewhere in similarity to what you're trying to give, this would also help you narrow down on the journal. Is there anything else?
Excuse me, ma'am. There's a query from a student, Sundaravalli. For survey method, is it ethical clearance is important if we wish to publish?
For whatever study that you do, an ethical clearance is always important. Your institutional ethics committee has to always approve your study. This is more of an ethics approval that has to be done for every study. And for every journal, wherever you go to submit, I will tell you once again, you cannot submit anything without an ethics clearance, an EC letter. So whatever you do, make sure you have your ethics approval done first, then go ahead with your study. Only then will you be able to submit it, because an EC letter is something that you will have to submit for the journal.
Yes. Ma'am, there is one more question. Yeah.
Will this hold given for a product development ethical clearance?
For a product development, it would be preferable generally. Since yours is not a clinical trial, you do not have to get a CTRI number and all of that. But it would be preferable if you have an EC letter, because what happens, you sometimes come to the fag end of the study and your study will be rejected in the journal for no EC letter. This is something that we have come across very often. So instead of having that issue at the end, it is better you take care of it in the beginning and keep your EC letter.
Hello, good morning, ma'am.
Yes, good morning.
What is the difference between statistical analysis and data analysis?
Your statistical analysis and data analysis is pretty much the same thing. It is different terms that we use while we work. Sometimes we refer to it as data analysis, sometimes we refer to it as statistical analysis. In this, basically all your data is analyzed and your statistical tests are done, which can help in finding your results, either your t-tests or your man-Whitney tests or whatever tests that are there. Everything can be found on in your basically your data analysis report, or your statistical analysis report, or your statistics report. It is called by varying terms. It depends on what each one is comfortable with. There isn't a difference between any of it. That is one question. Methodology opted through replica. What point can we consider to make it innovative? Now, your methodology will require some amount of rephrasing. If you are redoing something that has already been done, you can provide a citation of it to give the other author credit. If you are not doing something entirely different in your methodology, that's quite okay. You have to consider points while rephrasing it to make it innovative. That's pretty much all that you can do.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Actually, I have one question regarding the when we are preparing our final project like a teacher. For that, how to make the manuscript, how to ready it. Can you give us some suggestion on that?
I'm very sorry, Sana. I am unable to hear you. If you could just type it out in the chat box, it would be very helpful.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Please make sure you're sitting in a quiet place when you're asking a question.
Yeah, so Sana's question is she wants to know how to make a manuscript of your project. So I'm assuming your project would be your thesis, if I'm not mistaken. Now, your thesis is a book of about probably 150 pages or so. The important point to keep in mind while developing a manuscript of something that big or any other project is to keep the headings I've told you in mind, to keep your word count to a maximum of a minimum of 3,000, not include maximum of 3,000, not including references. 3,000 is the target that we look for. We prefer something not less than that. Maybe a little more, but it cannot be too much more than the 3,000 to 3,500 is what we look at for a manuscript, not including your references. You have to keep in mind the headings that I've told you, that is your introduction, methodology, results, and your discussion. You do not have to write an introduction for 3 pages. Your introduction can be 1 page or 3/4 page. Your methodology has to be just enough to cover everything that's done. Your results section has to give all your data. Also, please do keep in mind, some journals have a requirement of a particular number of tables and figures which you cannot go beyond. So what can be represented in tables, please do go ahead and highlight it in tables. What cannot be represented in tables has to come in text. Now coming to your discussion forms your bulk of your manuscript. This is where everything will be written, and this is what gives weightage to your paper. So try to add more in your discussion than in anything else.
Ma'am, there is one more query from Shanta Mariama.
Okay, how should a student attempt on a review paper?
Yeah.
A review paper is a very difficult thing to do. I'll be very honest with you. It requires a lot of research. When I say a lot of research, I do not mean only in writing. I mean research to understanding what you want to talk about. If you want to review a particular topic, you have to do enough review to understand what exactly the topic is from a lot of different perspectives. Limiting for 1 to 5 is not enough. You have to do a lot of research to do a review paper, and it's something that's very difficult to do at a very initial stage. It would be preferable you do it a little later on. Having said that, also, when you do review papers, one thing that we've seen most often is people that do reviews papers, there's a lot of plagiarism done in that, because you're referring to several manuscripts, several articles of different authors. So you cannot just copy paste their literature or their sayings. A proper rephrasing, a proper skilled writing has to be done on it. I hope I've answered your question.
Any other questions? Participants? Thanks for delivering a powerful talk, ma'am.
There's a feedback form posted in the chat box. Please fill your feedback.
And many of you, I hope you have submitted your registration form. Yesterday, we have provided the registration link. So if you have not done, please submit it as soon as possible.
If there are no questions, I think we can relieve Madam, so you can conclude, Nutana.
Yes, ma'am. I take this opportunity to thank our resource person for today's session, Dr. Crystal Later, ma'am. Thanks for delivering a powerful talk, ma'am, and thanks for your valuable time that you have given us.
Thank you for having me here. I hope I have been helpful to everyone, and I hope you all would actually incorporate a few of the tips that I have given, because trust me, consider what I've said. It would really help you all while writing a manuscript.
Thank you, ma'am. And there is a gentle reminder for all of you. Please attend the second session of today's talk. That is at evening at 5:30 p.m. Thank you, ma'am.
And apart from Padma Shri, they can join the group. It will be posted now.
I have posted, ma'am. Yeah.
You have posted already? You please announce
Yes.
once again. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a WhatsApp group for outsiders. So please, through that link, you can join that WhatsApp group, please.
And every day it's the same link.
Yeah.
Do not get confused. You can join with the same link.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Nutana.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Have a nice day. All right.
Yeah, ma'am. Can we end the meeting, ma'am? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you, Dr. Crystal. Yeah, bye, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.